Hey everyone, James from TDB here. Today I am going to be talking about the novelty buff. So this is an interesting concept, and I think I've kind of thought about this a little bit throughout the years, but it was really kind of brought to me by a YouTube commenter. So I'm just going to go ahead and read their comment. And so shout outs to Gabe H7655. And I forget what video they commented on this, but I immediately added this to kind of like the in-between-isodes of things I would like to explore. I don't think there's quite enough there for a blog post, but it did provide a lot of food for thought for me. So here I am reading verbatim. There's a topic that's been on my mind recently, which I feel is adjacent to this video, and that is a new tea's, quotes, novelty buff. In other words, new and radically different teas can pick our interest, so much so that we end up liking them much more during the first session or two than we do once we're accustomed to them. The tea could be from a new factory, terroir, or entirely new category altogether. I remember earlier in my tea journey how my first good blank tea would often be better than my latter experiences with it due to the excitement surrounding it upon the first smells and sip. There may be a spectrum to this, and others' levels of open-mindedness may vary. I'd love to chat with other tea people about their anecdotal novelty buffs or lack thereof. Additionally, can this effect, as exciting as it may be, falsely amplify our positive judgment when trying limited amounts of new tea, leading to the disappointing cakes in our stash being less good than we remember? Great point, great post. I think it's something that, to his point, does hit people differently, just because a lot of it is very psychological. So, someone might be predisposed to the teas in their stash. I know a couple drinkers that seem to be, generally prefer that and have a bias towards those teas. And there are other drinkers that might be like, ooh, it's like a shiny new object or whatnot. And it brought a lot of different thoughts for me. For one, I think once you've kind of tasted a lot of the different big categories of pu'er and stuff like that, generally speaking, I have become very skeptical of kind of like the new flavors. So like, especially like kind of wild tea, non-standard varietal flavors. And that's where I think you can get into a little trouble, because those things are just, they're kind of one of ones. They're different than normal pu'er. And I think in some ways chasing those is kind of a, maybe not the best thing to chase. That being said, I do think there is something to this in terms of, all kinds of stuff. I mean, like in terms of like first time trying older Malaysian stored stuff, a different category. And I think it's important to note that, and note that you might be giving kind of this buff to newer things. And I think the ultimate test for this is something like the speed test. Now, of course, you could go ahead and say, well, James, it's like if you buy a tea and then you run through it real quickly and then you buy more and then you don't run through it, maybe it was like that first cake was all impacted by a novelty buff. And indeed, you're right. But still, I think kind of the real preferences of what you're willing to drink, I think is probably the best metric we have here. Because otherwise we're talking about the speed test, but let's say like the delayed speed test. So what teas are you drinking kind of a year later? So kind of as a fun exercise, I did scroll through on my.tdb what I had been drinking through and what I had acquired in the last couple of years versus years ago. And I think there is definitely like a preference, especially when I first get like a few cakes of something, to drink through it, at a rapider pace than I will be eventually. Nonetheless, I think I do have a pretty good gauge on what I will or will not drink through at this point. And looking through, there are some kind of old favorites that are very, easily past the speed test for me, even though I bought them potentially a decade or longer ago. So teas like the Yangqing Hao Qijang, that's a very, very easy going down tea for me. Some of those other YQH teas do pretty well, but there are also some other teas as well. Yan tea is another one that I've had around for quite some time, so I wouldn't say that has that kind of artificial novelty buff working. Yeah, some interesting stuff to think about, and I don't think this is something concrete where you could be like, yeah, it's like a plus 20% novelty buff for drinker X or whatnot. But there is something to be said for getting excited about tea, about something new. I think these are good things. I think the challenge is making sure we don't make rash decisions that are going to result in way too much of a certainty that we may or may not want to drink through later. So I am skeptical of having something that is like, a totally different experience and then buying a whole lot of it versus something that's like, 20% different, and then a little bit better you can place it. So I think, I'm talking about a bit about like the non-standard varietals there, where you can kind of land in these weird traps where you can end up with a bunch of this tea, and it may not be kind of the correct purchase. For Pu'er, I'm in many ways I'm a fairly conventionalist in that sense. Okay, so that concludes this episode. Probably Gabe's comment was more interesting than the rest of this episode, but let me know what you think of it. I thought it was a great comment. So thank you, Gabe H7655, and I will see y'all next time. Cheers.